I think what I wanted to try and go through today and have a look is where we see it from an Amdocs perspective, and I liked, and a lot of the stuff resonated with what KPMG guy William just said just then. How do we see the challenges in the telecoms industry, and also how we approach it, and some of the ways that we're looking to approach it. You know, not maybe secret sauce, but at least the approach that we're taking. A lot of you may know Amdocs, if you know Amdocs at all. It looks, mainly it's around the revenue and billing data and the customer care applications and solutions that we provide, and we obviously provide those across the globe. You know, 3 billion odd subscribers that we support, 250 odd customers, 2,500 projects. What's probably less well known is that we've actually been in the data warehouse and the data management side for about the last 10 years. We actually acquired a company out of Dublin, which was Changing Worlds, Dublin in Ireland, which came to us with real-time processing and 16 or 17 odd patents in the analytics world. We also acquired a companies called Actix and Cellsite, which are in the RAN space, and they came with a bunch of analytical guys as well. So we've been building up over the last few years in terms of our knowledge base around the big data and the analytical side. In the last couple of years, we've released our first Hadoop telco platform, which was for the customer management side. And then in the last sort of 12, 18 months, we actually consolidated that into the big data and systems integration group, which I work with. So over the years, we've been looking at this sort of analytics world, the big data world, and growing up our knowledge base around this. And we just GA'd our first platform. So we come with a little bit of knowledge, if not maybe as a pure sort of big data player. So this is my take on the Gardner hype curve that we just saw before, that we just ran through. I call it more of a roller coaster. We had a bit of, I think everybody a few years ago were all there building Hadoop platforms. They were building data stores. They were trying to figure out what to do. Probably the technology and the capability is now caught up with some of our insights and our ideas. And we've been able to modernize what we do with the data stores, and we bring it in. And you know, as we've been hearing before, the data science guys are on the rise. The analytical guys are on the rise. They're there with the data sources. What I would say, though, and I agree with Will just before us, the path of getting the value out of that data and the path of extracting, you know, what we can do and how we can analyze that data, I think we're still going there. We're still trying to understand that. But at the end of the day, you know, we have all this technology behind us, and as Will sort of alluded to as well, it's around the customer's experience. The customer doesn't care how we do this. He wants to figure out how we can improve his view of the world. I kind of like this slide. It kind of works for me. There's loads and loads of data in the telecom business. I mean, we come from the usage, the billing, the revenue and charging side. As I said, we just acquired a couple of companies from the RAN side. We're working with partners on the probe. That is just tons and tons of data that we bring in to the system. And then there's the social media, which, you know, we're still trying to figure out how we can use the social media and what we can do with the social media. And we find this data rains in on us and it fills up the data lake. But to me, I'd like to kind of take us back to a historical sort of an example of this. There's all this data. If we look back to the Langdon versus Roosevelt, 1936. So I'm going way back. The Literary Digest went out and did a survey. And their survey looked at 10 million they sent a postal survey out to 10 million people. Of that 10 million, 2.5 million responded. So quite a lot in 1936. And Literary Digest had always been out there predicting the presidential election, normally getting it to 1 or 2%. 1 or 2%. In 1936, they predicted Landon would win 51, 45, 55, 47, something like that. They had a fair gap to say that Landon was going to win. When the results came in, the results were 61% to Roosevelt, 37% to Landon because they got it wrong. They'd increased their data knowledge. They'd increased it up to 2.4 million, the biggest survey they'd ever done, but they still got it wrong and way wrong. And the reason was that though they had more data, the data wasn't the right segmentation, wasn't the right understanding. They'd gone out and posted it to people that had a telephone, those that had a car, those guys that had magazine subscriptions. And when we look at it, when you look at it from, say, George Gallup, who was actually there at the same time, who did a survey of 50,000 odd people, he got it right and put Roosevelt in the lead by 1%, but he actually made it right. So the question is, what was the difference? Well, the difference was, it was the Depression, it was the people that could afford cars, telephones at the time, were the people that they polled, and therefore they had a different perspective on the data. So analysing the data and understanding the data that we're going to use is, I think, key and critical to everything that we do. And making sure that we get the right segmentation before we make a decision. So what is it we've got to do? We've got to understand where to start. Where do we start with the data? What business problem are we trying to solve? Which data do we need in order to solve it? We've also got to understand the volume of the data. There's no point just having this great data lake out there. We've got to know what data we're going to bring in. But one of the key things I think we see in the telco industry is this data is in different silos. It might be in the network silo, it might be in the revenue silo, it might be in the customer care silo, it might be in the marketing silo. So we have this data is in different silos, different IT infrastructures, and we somehow have got to pull this together and correlate it. But not only have we got to pull the data, we want to pull the right data. Otherwise, we're back to the Roosevelt case. I'd also say that the next thing is the advanced analytics. So we talked about analytics before, but we've got to understand what is the right insight that we want for this analytics. What is it that we've got to support here? Can we drive actionable results? And I think that's the key thing for anything that we do, anything that we should be focused on. It should be driving actionable results, not just driving analytics for analytics' sake, just having data scientists sit on top of this data. But I think the critical thing is closing the loop. Now, closing the loop means once you've taken this data, what do we do with it next? So if we take a network data and we take segmentation of customers, can we push that into a policy control engine so that we actually control the data usage of a certain type of subscriber? Do we improve the enterprise customer, the HVA customer, and maybe throttle other customers instead? Do we bring data up from the network and give it to the care representative so that they can understand the actual actions that are happening with their customer, whether that's from a billing perspective or whether that's from a network perspective, or maybe it's their order process? We were talking about this just before we came in with a couple of guys. There's a lot of complex infrastructure underneath all of this data, or all these organizations. And each of these organizations has their own infrastructure. A lot of them have their own applications, and they're applications that they derive business value from already. They have different needs within each of the departments. Customer care, they want to understand and improve customer satisfaction. So do they want to, when somebody rings up, can we give them an insight into their billing data? Can we give them insight into their usage? Can we give them insight into their network usage? And know what I mean, network usage? I mean, are they having drop calls on the network? Are they having slow data rates? Are they going to be impacted by that? The marketing we touched on as well. Can we segment it? And we talked about, I think Will talked about segmentation. That's something that we do, but can we segment them so that we understand them from a telco perspective, not just as an individual of a certain age and a certain demographic? Network and network optimization. Again, do we look at it how do we look at it from an SDN perspective, or network virtualization? How do we look at it from policy control? How do we take an actionable insight? But I think the key thing is that for all of these different organizations, even though they've all got different insights and want different things, basically they have three areas that they want to improve. The customer experience, they want to drive more revenue, and they want to improve efficiency. So if we touched on these are the issues on the network, or the problems or the challenges the network providers have, what's our recipe or what's our analysis for success? How do we get there? What's the process that we go by? From our side, we look at it from, I think, 3 different ways. We look at data science as a service, we look at actionable applications, and we look at data management and modernization. So data science as a service, we're looking and saying, can we find user-driven, customer-driven use cases? Can we be iterative? Can we be agile? Can we bring the data in? Can we make sure we have data integrity? But above all, can we understand what it is that the business problem that we are trying to solve or the customer is trying to solve? And it may not be the original business problem that they thought. Actionable applications. So we want to drive out and have applications within our suite, but we want to make sure they're actionable, so they tie down. So it's not just about analyzing the data and creating a report, but it's tying down the data and then making sure that we tie that application or that insight back into our customer care, into our marketing, or into our network. And then the data management and modernization, how do we roll out, how do we map our platform? One of the key sort of messages that we have is that a lot of people out there already have a data warehouse. They may even have a big data play. They may have, their Hadoop infrastructure. How can we take what we do, how we have as our analysts, what we have as our platform, and how can we put that analytics embedded within their system, not necessarily adding a 3rd or a 4th Hadoop platform into their system. Data science guys. We have quite a lot of data science guys. I work with them. We go and analyze some networks. Recently, we did one in APAC. We tried to draw in a whole lot of network data into our offsite, and we started to analyze it. The data science guys, when they looked at the data, they come up with a whole set of findings. I would call it findings. The key thing with those findings, though, is that we were just analysis paralysis. We would just keep going round and round, finding more and more information, more and more different things. They're trying to find problems where there weren't problems. So the key thing with this was then we tied them together with people that understood the business and tied them together with people that understand the domain. Once we tie those type of guys together, then we start to get a real understanding. So the key thing is here, the data scientists will have their analytical models. They will have their predictive analysis. They'll have all the good stuff that goes with them. They'll have their real-time processing tools, and they'll talk to you whizzo about all their different intellectual property rights and their analytical theorems that they've got. But the key thing is to match those with some of the domain experts. People around the transport industry, around the network side, around the marketing, the ordering. Make sure that you have the two guys together. And then on top of that, put a business analysis. The findings that we took from this is that where our competitors were going into bids and saying 17 odd weeks to do that analysis and have a look at it and try and bring it together, we went in and did the last 3 we were doing in 6 weeks. So we took the data, analysed it, brought it in, and then come back with results, actionable results. And I think that's critical because we got this team ethic that goes into any different location. One of the ones we talked about here, and we talked about customer satisfaction, and we talked about taking data science people in and application people and business people into one organization. In here, we're looking at NPS results. So in the text analytics, we can look at who are the customers, what are they actually writing about on their NPS surveys, what are they saying in terms of the what affects them? What is it that affects them and causes them to give a low score on the NPS? Is it something to do with care? Is it something to do with service ordering? Is it something to do with the network? Is it something to do with the way they're being marketed to? If we can understand what that NPS score is and understand and categorize the customers, whether they're high-value customers, whether they're enterprise customers, we can categorize them into a certain set of buckets. And then on the other side, we can have a set of customer experience indicators that look at the real life, what is happening on the network. So what is actually happening on the network? What is their experience on the network? And that's one path. And if they bust that threshold and they are sensitive to network issues, then we can do something about it. If they have got a billing issue or they've got a customer care issue, it's the same thing. If we can find the threshold that actually makes them have a poor NPS score, if we can tie that to a KPI that we take off the network or the care or the marketing domain, and we bring those two together and we can trend it, then we can do something and be actionable, that is actionable, and also maybe ahead of the game as well, before the customer really starts to go to the next cycle, which is to churn. So we talked about domain science, so we talk about applications and platforms. As I said, the idea we have with the applications, the platforms, is not necessarily to provide a platform, but our concept and our idea is to actually provide actionable analytics or actionable solutions. As I said, we talked about care. I mean, there's ones, we have customer insight, we look at billing information. So I think, we look at billing information. Can we see where bill shock's going to come from a customer? Can we understand that they've had a bill, it suddenly shoots up, we find out why. Can we do something about that and be proactive to it and tell them what's going on? But not only that, but if somebody's calling into the call center, let's make sure that we understand probably why they're calling into the call center. If they're calling in and they've got a high bill and they know we've just sent a bill out, then let's set the customer service representative up with a set of informations and next best actions about what they've got to do and why the customer is probably calling in. It changes the dynamic of the conversation. You can do the same thing for network information. If they've had lots of drop calls on the network, they've had poor data throughputs, applications aren't working, then if they're calling in, and we can also tie this back to the CEI stuff from before, if they're calling in and that is we can determine that's the probable cause that they're calling in for, and we can then take that and give the CSR a next set of actions. This guy's probably calling in because of this. Therefore, do this, this, and this if he is calling in about that. Same for marketing. We won't go through that. There's segmentation. There's next best offer. Can we understand the customer? Where is he on the cycle? Which offer? What I'd like to come back to is some of the network use cases. So we have things about predictive maintenance, making sure sites fall over, if they're going to predict when they're going to fall over, see if we can see that a couple of steps out, maybe a day, 24 hours in advance. If we can, then we can make some corrective steps, especially if it's a site that is based on a lot of high volume, high VIP enterprise type traffic. But I'd like to focus and look on something, and I think we mentioned this, it was mentioned slightly before in Will's presentation. Why not pull the network data, the customer connectivity, or the actual connectivity of a site? So we understand from the RAN data, we understand from probes, we understand from all the other systems out there what that particular site is and what their connectivity is, whether they have a slow throughput, whether they have bad application experience, whether they have drop calls on that site. We can understand that. So we can create a connectivity index for every site, and we can do that in fairly near real time. But at the same side, on the other side, we can also pull the value of that site. We have the usage data. We have the understanding of the customer. We have his billing records. We understand whether they are enterprise customers, whether they're high-value customers. If we pull those two bits of information together, we can then determine a site's value and a site's connectivity or how well it is connected into the network. Now, if we join those two things together, we can build that up by a sub-region or by a sub-market, into a market, into a regional effect, so we can start to understand where to invest our money. So if you're rolling out an LTE network, if you're rolling out the capability to put in smart cells or whatever technology you're rolling out, Wi-Fi, we can determine here where it is that you can invest, where it is that you're going to get more coverage or capacity throughput, but at the same time, have you got the people behind it that will actually want to use it? And if they do want to use it, will they have the right revenue in order to make it worthwhile? So this is changing the dynamic, I suppose, between saying we're going to do this by just having coverage plots and capacity plots and trying to look at it from postcodes and trying to do the demographics that way, to actually using real data in real time in terms of determining. And then we can look back over a period of time, 90 days, a year, and understand where that shifts and where that trend is going. I'll just go through this quickly, but again, there's obviously stuff around the right time marketing. You know, we have the same information, we have the same data, we have the plan, and we also bring in there the usage, the customer care information, the geolocation information, so that we can give them the right offer at the right time. We do geofencing in terms of the marketing campaigns. We know where people are, what time of day, and we know what demographic they belong to. And the last one, obviously, we're looking at, we mentioned, is data management and modernization. I think the key thing I'd like to say on this is we obviously understand, and people out there have a data warehouse. They have business intelligence, business reports. You know, some customers obviously want to have and offload some of that processing and that capability to a big data platform. Others have their own big data platform, and they have their own analytics that run on top of that. Whatever we have to do, we always have to come in and say that we have to fit within that infrastructure, fit within that organization. So we adapt to that, we add to it, rather than trying to say that we want to replace by another third-party big data platform or Hadoop infrastructure. I suppose the three things to wrap up then is data integrity and the availability. We've got to make sure that we have the data intimacy. Do we understand the data that we're looking at? Have we made sure that we understand the data that we're looking at? Have we brought the right data in? If we go back to that Roosevelt use case, yes, we've got a lot of data, but have we made sure it's the right data to make the right analytical decisions on? And is it available all the time? There's no point having this data come in if we don't understand the data integrity and availability of that data. And domain knowledge and know-how, I think that is critical. You know, we've got to make sure that we pair together business ideas and concepts along with the domain expertise to understand the business context of the analytics that we're going to put on it, and make sure that we enrich that with a customer understanding. And then I think the final and most obvious one is closing the loop. Can we close the loop with what we do? So once we've done the analysis, once we've brought the data in, we've done the analysis, we've got to make sure that we do actionable insights, either from an application perspective or from a data science perspective. Whatever we do has got to close the loop and do something with the data, and not just be another set of reports that we produce. So, thank you.